The news of Morrison's fight with the Zalathi ship spread across human space faster than hyperspace messages. Every human colony and every human ship heard about the captain who said no to the aliens. Some called him a hero and some called him a dangerous fool. But everyone was talking about what happened at New Denver Colony. Admiral Henry Collins sat in his office on Earth and read the reports from the Zalathi Empire. They wanted Morrison arrested and his crew put on trial for attacking Federation forces. Collins was the head of what remained of Earth's military, and he had to make a choice between following Federation law and protecting his own people. Collins had known Morrison for 15 years, and he knew the younger captain was not a troublemaker. Morrison followed orders and did his duty, but something had changed. Collins looked at the security video from New Denver Colony and saw the little boy crying for his parents. He understood why Morrison had made his choice. The Federation Council called an emergency meeting, and Collins had to go to the space station where the alien representatives met. The Zalathi ambassador was a crystal being twice as tall as a human with a voice that sounded like glass breaking. The ambassador demanded that Morrison be turned over to them for punishment. Collins stood before the council and looked at the alien faces around the room. There were the fish like Aquari who controlled the water worlds. There were the gas-breathing Vorten who lived in the outer system planets. There were dozens of alien species and only 3 humans in the entire council chamber. The human Morrison attacked Federation forces without cause, the Zalathi ambassador said. His actions cannot be allowed to stand, or other species might think they can ignore Federation law when it suits them. Collins cleared his throat and spoke in a steady voice. Ambassador Morrison was protecting human civilians who were being forcibly removed from their homes. The evacuation timeline was changed without proper notice, and families were being separated. The Zalathi ambassador's crystal body flashed with angry light. Humans agreed to follow Federation decisions when they joined our alliance. If humans cannot follow our laws, then perhaps they should not be part of our Federation. Collins felt his blood turn cold. The threat was clear, and every alien in the room heard it. Obey or be thrown out of the Federation, alone in a galaxy full of hostile species. Humanity would not last long without the protection of the alien alliance. But Collins also thought about Danny, Carter, and all the other human children who had been scared and crying while crystal soldiers grabbed them. He thought about Kate Sullivan and the colonists who had built beautiful cities on empty worlds, only to be told they had to leave. He thought about 200 years of humans being told they were not good enough for the same rights as alien species. The Federation will have Admiral Morrison's answer in 7 days, Collins said, and walked out of the council chamber before the aliens could respond. On the Defiance, Morrison was getting messages from human ships all over the galaxy. Some captains wanted to join him and fight the Zalathi. Others warned him that he was starting a war humanity could not win. Morrison read every message and felt the weight of what he had started. Lisa Park came to Morrison with a datapad full of intelligence reports she had been working on for months. Her research showed that the Zalathi had been pushing humans out of profitable star systems for years. Every time there was a vote about mineral rights or trade routes, the humans lost and had to move somewhere else. "Captain, this was not about New Denver Colony," Park said. "This was about testing how far they could push us before we would fight back. The Zalathi have been moving us into smaller and smaller areas of space." Ben Rodriguez joined them in Morrison's ready room with his own disturbing news. He had been talking to engineers on other human ships, and they all reported the same thing. The aliens were making it harder for humans to get new technology and spare parts for their ships. Human vessels were falling behind while alien fleets got stronger every year. "Captain, we are being set up," Rodriguez said. "They want us weak, so when they finally decide to get rid of us, we cannot fight back." Morrison looked at the star charts on his wall. The human territories were scattered across dozens of systems, but they were small compared to the vast alien empires. Earth itself was just one planet in a galaxy of thousands of worlds controlled by species that saw humans as a problem to be managed. The answer came when Morrison received a coded message from Admiral Collins. The message was short and simple, but it changed everything. Collins was secretly giving Morrison intelligence about other planned evacuations. There were 12 more human colonies that would be forced to relocate in the next 6 months. Morrison called his senior officers together and showed them the list of colonies. Each one had something the aliens wanted: rare minerals or good farming land or strategic locations for military bases. The pattern was clear and ugly. The Zalathi were not just taking New Denver Colony, they were taking everything humans had built in space. "We have a choice," Morrison told his crew. "We can surrender Morrison to the Zalathi and hope they leave the rest of us alone. Or we can accept that this fight was always coming and try to save as many human lives as we can." Park spoke first. "Captain, if we run, they will hunt us across the galaxy. If we surrender, they will take our colonies one by one until there are no humans left in space. At least if we fight, we have a chance," Rodriguez nodded. "My family lives on Harmony Colony, and that is number 4 on their list. I am not going to let crystal monsters take my children's home without a fight." Morrison made his decision. He sent a message to every human ship and every human colony. The message was broadcast on every frequency and transmitted to every corner of human space. Morrison told his people what the aliens were planning and what it would mean for humanity's future. "We tried to be good Federation citizens," Morrison said in his message. "We followed their laws and accepted their decisions even when they hurt us. But now they want to take our homes and scatter our people across the galaxy like refugees. Some things are worth fighting for, and freedom is one of them." Within hours, Morrison received responses from human ships across the galaxy. Captain Susan Blake of the UES Freedom said her crew was ready to fight. Captain Ryan Cooper of the UES Independence reported that his ship was already moving to intercept a Zalathi evacuation fleet. Dozens of human captains were making the same choice Morrison had made. Admiral Collins received Morrison's message at the same time as everyone else. He looked at the list of colonies the Zalathi wanted to take, and he thought about the millions of human families who would be forced from their homes. Collins walked to his office window and looked down at Earth, where billions of humans lived and worked and dreamed of better days. Collins sent his own message to the Federation Council. "Earth Command has reviewed the Zalathi demands, and our answer is no. Captain Morrison acted to protect human civilians, and we will not surrender him to alien justice. Any further attempts to forcibly evacuate human colonies will be met with resistance." The die was cast, and there was no turning back. Across human space, families watched the news reports and wondered what would happen next. On alien worlds, the Federation species began preparing for something they had never expected. The humans were no longer willing to be pushed around, and the galaxy was about to change forever. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the stars through the big window. The UES Defiance was not the newest ship in the human fleet, but it was his ship, and his crew was the best in space. Morrison had been fighting in space for 20 years, and he knew that today would be different from all the other days. The message from Earth Command came through the speakers with a cold voice. Morrison read the orders twice and felt his stomach turn. The Zalathi Empire wanted the humans to leave 50 colonies in the Kepler sector. The Federation Council had voted, and the humans had lost again. 50 million people had to pack up their lives and move to worlds nobody wanted. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Park walked up to Morrison with worry in her eyes. She was young but smart, and Morrison trusted her more than anyone else on the ship. Park had been studying the Zalathi for years, and she knew they always got what they wanted from the Federation Council. "Captain, the orders are clear, but they do not make sense," Park said. "These colonies have been human homes for over 100 years, and the Zalathi just decided they want the mineral rights now." Morrison nodded and called his chief engineer, Ben Rodriguez, to the bridge. Rodriguez was the kind of man who could fix anything and make it work better than before. He kept the Defiance running when newer ships broke down, and Morrison needed his honest thoughts about their mission. "Ben, we have new orders," Morrison said. "We need to evacuate New Denver Colony and 49 other worlds because the Federation says so." Rodriguez looked at the orders and shook his head. "Captain, these people built their lives on these worlds, and now they have to leave because some crystal beings want more rocks to eat." The 3 officers stood quiet for a moment. They all knew the truth that nobody wanted to say. Humans were second-class citizens in the Federation, and they had been for 200 years. Every time there was a vote about something important, the alien species would vote together against the humans. Morrison gave the order to set course for New Denver Colony. The trip through hyperspace took 3 days, and Morrison used the time to study the colony reports. New Denver had farms and factories and schools where children learned about Earth history. The colonists had built something beautiful on a world that was empty rocks when they arrived. When the Defiance dropped out of hyperspace near New Denver, Morrison saw the colony ships already in orbit. Thousands of families were loading their things into cargo containers and leaving the only homes they had ever known. Morrison watched through his telescope as children cried while their parents tried to pack 200 years of human history into metal boxes. Colony Administrator Kate Sullivan called the ship, and her voice was tired and sad. "Captain Morrison, thank you for coming to help with the evacuation, but we need more time. The Zalathi ships are coming early and people are not ready to leave." Morrison looked at his orders again. The Federation said the evacuation had to be complete in 5 days, but the Zalathi enforcement fleet was arriving in 2 days. Someone had changed the timeline and nobody had told the humans. "Miss Sullivan, we will do what we can to help," Morrison said. "My crew will come down to help people pack and load the ship's park." And Rodriguez took teams down to the colony surface, while Morrison stayed on the bridge to watch for the Zalathi ships. The reports from the surface made Morrison angry. Families were leaving behind family pictures and books and toys because there was no room in the cargo ships. Old people were crying because they would never see their gardens again. The Zalathi ships arrived like silver knives cutting through space. There were 12 of them, and they were bigger than any human ship. The lead ship called Morrison, and a voice like breaking glass spoke through the speakers. "Human vessel, this is Zalathi Enforcer Shard Prime. Begin immediate evacuation of all organic life from this system. Resistance will be met with force." Morrison tried to explain that the colonists needed more time, but the Zalathi did not care. Their ships began moving toward the colony, and Morrison knew they would start forcing people off the planet whether they were ready or not. The disaster happened when the Zalathi ships landed near the main colony town. Their crystal soldiers began grabbing humans and throwing them onto transport ships. An 8-year-old boy named Danny Carter got separated from his parents in the chaos. Morrison watched through his ship cameras as the little boy ran between the legs of crystal giants looking for his mother and father. Danny Carter was crying and calling for his parents, but nobody could hear him over the noise of the evacuation ships. A Zalathi soldier picked up the boy and started carrying him toward a ship that was going to a different colony world than his parents. Morrison felt something break inside his chest. He had followed Federation orders for 20 years. He had watched humans get pushed around and treated like second-class citizens. He had seen human colonies given away to alien species who wanted the resources, but watching a scared little boy get taken from his family was too much. "Lisa, take us down to the colony," Morrison said. "Ben, get the weapons ready." Park looked at Morrison with surprise. "Captain, if we interfere with the Zalathi operation, we will be breaking Federation law." Morrison watched Danny Carter disappear into the alien transport ship. "Lisa, some laws are wrong and some orders should not be followed. Take us down." The Defiance dropped toward the colony like a falling star. Morrison opened fire on the Zalathi ships and told his crew to beam down and help the colonists. The crystal soldiers were strong, but they moved slow, and the humans were faster and smarter. Rodriguez led a team that rescued Danny Carter and reunited him with his parents. Park coordinated the defense of the colony while Morrison fought the Zalathi ships in space. For the first time in 200 years, humans were fighting back against the aliens who pushed them around. When the smoke cleared, the Zalathi ships retreated, and the colonists were safe. But Morrison knew this was just the beginning. He had broken Federation law and there would be consequences. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity decided they had taken enough. The Federation Council met in emergency session while human ships gathered around every threatened colony. The Zalathi Empire had never faced organized resistance from humans before, and they were not sure how to respond. For 200 years, humans had complained and argued but always followed orders in the end. Now something had changed and the crystal beings were angry. Senator Amy Hughes stood before the Earth Parliament and delivered a speech that would be remembered for generations. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but her voice carried the anger of an entire species. Hughes had spent years trying to work within the Federation system, and she was tired of watching humans get pushed around. "My fellow humans, we have been patient for too long," Hughes said. "We have accepted second-class citizenship and hoped things would get better. We have watched our colonies given away to alien species and told ourselves it was for the greater good. But patience without strength is just another word for surrender." The Parliament voted to support Admiral Collins and the human fleet. Earth would not surrender Morrison to the Zalathi, and they would not allow any more forced evacuations of human colonies. It was the first time in 200 years that humanity had said no to the Federation and meant it. Morrison's rebel fleet grew larger every day as human ships abandoned their regular duties to join the fight. The Defiance was now the flagship of 37 vessels ranging from military cruisers to armed cargo ships. Morrison promoted Lisa Park to commander and gave her control of the tactical planning for their growing force. Park had been studying Zalathi military tactics, and she found weaknesses the crystal beings did not know they had. The aliens followed rigid patterns and never changed their strategies even when those strategies failed. Humans were different. They could adapt and change and think of new ways to fight when the old ways stopped working. Ben Rodriguez became the fleet's chief engineer and started working on upgrading their ships with captured Zalathi technology. The crystal beings had better weapons and shields than humans, but their technology was designed for their specific way of thinking. Rodriguez began modifying the alien systems to work the way humans thought and fought. The first major battle came when the Zalathi sent an enforcement fleet to arrest Morrison and destroy his rebel ships. 50 crystal vessels surrounded the human fleet near Titan Station and demanded surrender. Morrison knew his 37 ships could not win a direct fight, but Park had a different plan. "Captain, the Zalathi expect us to either surrender or fight them in a straight battle," Park said. "But we do not have to do what they expect. Human ships are faster and more flexible than crystal vessels. We can hit them and run away before they can respond." Morrison divided his fleet into small groups that attacked from different directions. While the Zalathi ships tried to form their traditional battle formations, the human vessels darted in and out like angry wasps. Rodriguez had equipped each ship with modified Zalathi weapons that could punch through crystal armor. The battle lasted 6 hours, and when it was over, 12 Zalathi ships were destroyed and the rest had retreated. Morrison lost only 3 human vessels, but he knew the victory would bring consequences. The Federation could no longer ignore the human rebellion, and they would send bigger fleets next time. News of the victory at Titan Station spread across the galaxy faster than hyperspace communications. Other oppressed species began asking questions about Federation rule. The Corvan people had been nearly wiped out by the Zalathi centuries earlier, and they sent secret messages of support to the human rebels. Dr. Carl Bennett was a human scientist, working at a Federation research station when the Zalathi soldiers came for him. Bennett had been studying alien psychology, and the crystal beings wanted to know what made humans so dangerous and unpredictable. They dragged him to a secret laboratory where other human prisoners were being held. The Zalathi scientists ran tests on human brains and studied human behavior patterns. They wanted to understand why humans could adapt and change, while other species followed the same patterns for thousands of years. Bennett realized the aliens were trying to find ways to control or eliminate the human ability to think creatively. Morrison received intelligence about the secret research station from the Corvan rebels. A rescue mission would be dangerous, but the humans being held prisoner had valuable information about Zalathi plans. Park volunteered to lead the rescue team while Morrison kept the main fleet hidden in the asteroid fields near Jupiter. Park took 12 ships and attacked the research station at the edge of Zalathi space. The station was heavily defended, but the human ships used hit-and-run tactics to avoid the crystal beam weapons. Rodriguez had designed new jamming systems that confused Zalathi sensors and made the human ships harder to target. The rescue team found Bennett and 40 other human prisoners in the laboratory cells. Bennett was weak, but his mind was still sharp, and he had learned terrible things about Zalathi plans for humanity. The crystal beings were not just trying to move human colonies, they were planning to eliminate humans entirely as a threat to Federation stability. "They have been studying us for decades," Bennett told Morrison when the fleet reunited. "The Zalathi know that humans are different from other species, and they are afraid of what that means. We can adapt and change and think in ways they cannot predict, and that terrifies them." Bennett's research showed that the Zalathi reproduced by consuming rare crystals found in the systems they had taken from other species. Their expansion across the galaxy was not just about power, it was about survival. Without constant expansion and new crystal sources, the Zalathi Empire would collapse within a generation. Morrison realized this information was humanity's greatest weapon. The other Federation species did not know that the Zalathi were slowly taking over the galaxy for their own survival. If the truth came out, other species might join the human rebellion against crystal rule. Admiral Collins on Earth received reports of more human colonies declaring independence from the Federation. The rebellion was spreading beyond Morrison's fleet, as entire star systems decided they were tired of alien control. Collins began coordinating with the colonial governments to form a united human defense force. The Zalathi Empire responded by demanding that all Federation species help hunt down the human rebels. Some alien governments agreed, but others hesitated. The fish-like Aquari had their own problems with Zalathi expansion into water worlds. The gas-breathing Vorthon were losing their outer system territories to crystal mining operations. Morrison knew the rebellion had reached a turning point. Either humanity would unite the oppressed species of the galaxy against Zalathi rule, or they would face extinction as an organized species. The next battle would determine whether humans had a future among the stars, or would be scattered across the galaxy as refugees. Collins sent a final message to the Federation Council announcing Earth's withdrawal from the Alliance. "We tried to work within your system and follow your laws," the Admiral said. "But when your laws demand we surrender our people to alien justice and abandon our colonies to crystal expansion, we must say no. Humanity will find its own path among the stars." The message reached Morrison's fleet as they prepared for the largest battle in human history. The Zalathi Empire was sending 300 ships to destroy the human rebellion once and for all. Morrison had 80 ships and the support of Corvan rebels, but he was still outnumbered 4-1. Park studied the tactical situation and made a recommendation that would change the course of the war. Instead of fighting a defensive battle around human colonies, they would take the war to the Zalathi homeworld itself. A strike at the heart of the Crystal Empire would force them to recall ships from human space and might inspire other species to join the rebellion. Morrison looked at his officers and saw determination in their eyes. They had come too far to turn back now, and they all knew what failure would mean for humanity. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans decided they had taken enough abuse from alien masters. The Human Independence War spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Dozens of species that had been quietly suffering under Federation rule saw humanity's rebellion and decided they were tired of being pushed around by the Zalathi Empire. Morrison's fleet grew from 80 ships to over 200 as alien rebels joined the fight against crystal domination. The Corvan hegemony was the first major alien power to openly support the human rebellion. The Corvan people were tall and thin with silver skin, and they remembered what the Zalathi had done to their homeworld 300 years earlier. Corvan Admiral Sektar brought 50 warships to join Morrison's fleet and shared intelligence about Zalathi military installations. "Your species has shown the galaxy that the crystal tyrants can be fought," Sektar told Morrison during their first meeting. "The Corvan people have waited centuries for this chance to strike back at those who destroyed our civilization." Lisa Park worked closely with Corvan tactical officers to develop new strategies that combined human adaptability with alien knowledge of Federation systems. The Corvan had been fighting a secret war against the Zalathi for decades, and they knew weaknesses in crystal defenses that humans had never discovered. Ben Rodriguez found himself leading a team of engineers from 12 different species as they worked to upgrade the rebel fleet. Each alien race brought their own technology and ideas to the project. Aquari water cooling systems made human reactors more efficient. Fourth-hand gas manipulation techniques improved engine performance. Human creative thinking tied it all together into something completely new. The war changed everything about how humans saw themselves and their place in the galaxy. For 200 years they had been told they were junior partners in the Federation alliance. Now they were leading a revolution that was reshaping galactic politics and proving that small species could stand up to ancient empires. Senator Amy Hughes formed the Provisional Human Government and began reaching out to other rebel species to create a new alliance based on equality instead of domination. The old Federation had been controlled by the strongest species, while weaker ones followed orders. Hughes wanted to build something different, where every species had an equal voice regardless of their military power. Morrison promoted Lisa Park to captain of her own ship and gave her command of the fast attack squadrons that were hitting Zalathi supply lines across the galaxy. Park's forces became known as the Ghost Fleet because they would appear without warning to destroy crystal convoys and then vanish before reinforcements could arrive. Park's most famous victory came when she intercepted a Zalathi transport convoy carrying enslaved populations from conquered worlds. The crystal beings had been secretly taking people from species they claimed to be protecting and using them as forced labor in their mining operations. Park's rescue of 2 million alien civilians exposed the true nature of Zalathi rule to the entire galaxy. Dr. Carl Bennett worked with scientists from rebel species to understand how the Zalathi Empire really functioned. His research revealed that the crystal beings were not the ancient, peaceful civilization they claimed to be. They were parasites that had been conquering and consuming other species for thousands of years while pretending to bring order to the galaxy. Every species that joined the Federation lost something, Bennett explained to Morrison. The Aquari lost their deep ocean worlds. The Vorthan lost their gas giant territories. The Corvin lost their entire homeworld. The pattern is always the same. Join the Federation and slowly watch everything you value get taken away by crystal expansion. Morrison used this information in broadcasts to species that were still loyal to the Federation. Many alien governments began asking difficult questions about treaties they had signed and territories they had given up. Some species discovered that resources they thought were being shared equally were actually going directly to Zalathi worlds. The turning point in the war came when the Rebel Alliance attacked 3 major Zalathi industrial centers simultaneously. Morrison led the assault on the Crystal Fortress world of Shard Prime while Park attacked the manufacturing planet of Crystal Heart, and Corvin forces struck at the mining world of Stone Deep. The triple attack forced the Zalathi to divide their military response and revealed how dependent they were on those industrial centers. When the rebel forces destroyed the crystal-growing facilities that produced New Zalathi, soldiers the Empire suddenly faced the possibility of running out of troops for the first time in their history. Morrison's assault on Shard Prime was the largest space battle in galactic history. Over 500 ships on each side fought among the crystal orbital platforms that surrounded the Zalathi stronghold. Human tactics and alien technology combined to break through defenses that had never been breached in 1,000 years of crystal rule. Ben Rodriguez led the engineering teams that planted fusion bombs inside the crystal-growing chambers. The explosions destroyed not just the facilities but the genetic templates the Zalathi used to create new members of their species. For the first time, the crystal beings faced the possibility of racial extinction. The war was not without cost for humanity and their allies. Captain Susan Blake died when her ship rammed a Zalathi dreadnought to save a convoy of refugee ships. Captain Ryan Cooper was captured during a raid and executed by crystal soldiers as an example to other rebels. Every human family had lost someone to the fight for freedom. Morrison felt the weight of every death and sometimes wondered if he had made the right choice when he rescued Danny Carter from the Zalathi evacuation ships. But then he would receive reports of liberated worlds where children of multiple species played together without fear, and he knew the sacrifice had been worth it. Admiral Collins coordinated the defense of human space while Morrison fought on the front lines. Earth became the unofficial capital of the Rebel Alliance as representatives from dozens of species came to coordinate their resistance efforts. Collins found himself hosting diplomatic meetings between species that had been enemies for centuries but were now united against Zalathi oppression. The Zalathi Empire made one last desperate attempt to win the war by threatening to destroy inhabited worlds rather than lose control of them. Crystal fleets moved toward major population centers and prepared to use planet-killing weapons against billions of innocent civilians. Morrison realized the final battle would not be fought in space but in the hearts and minds of ordinary people across the galaxy. The Zalathi were counting on fear to make the rebels surrender, but humans had learned something important during their long struggle for equality. Sometimes the only way to stop a bully was to stand up and fight, no matter how scary they seemed. Park received intelligence that the Zalathi were preparing their ultimate weapon on their homeworld, a massive crystal formation that could destroy entire star systems by manipulating gravity itself. If the weapon was completed, the Zalathi could threaten any world that opposed them with complete annihilation. Morrison made the decision that would end the war one way or another. The entire rebel fleet would assault the Zalathi homeworld and destroy the ultimate weapon before it could be used. It was the most dangerous mission in human history, but it was also the only way to ensure freedom for all the species of the galaxy. As the rebel fleet prepared for the final battle, Morrison thought about the long journey from New Denver Colony to the edge of Zalathi space. He had started as a captain trying to save one little boy from being separated from his parents. Now he was leading a galactic revolution that would determine the future of every species. Among the stars, the boy Danny Carter was safe, with his family on a liberated world where humans and aliens worked together as equals. Morrison hoped that someday Danny would understand that his tears at New Denver Colony had started something that changed the galaxy forever. The final battle for the Zalathi homeworld began when Morrison's rebel fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Crystal System. 600 ships from dozens of species faced the last stronghold of an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years. The Zalathi had pulled back all their forces to defend their homeworld and the space around the crystal planet, blazed with defensive energy fields. Lisa Park commanded the Ghost fleet squadron that would strike at the planet killers, while Morrison led the main assault force against the Zalathi orbital platforms. Admiral Sektar and his Corvin ships would attack the crystal growing facilities in the outer system. Every rebel captain knew this was their last chance to stop the Zalathi from using their ultimate weapon against innocent worlds. The crystal planet itself was a marvel of alien engineering, covered with massive structures that looked like mountain-sized gems reaching toward the stars. Deep inside the largest crystal formation, the Zalathi had built their ultimate weapon. Dr. Bennett's intelligence report said the Yanima device could create gravity waves powerful enough to tear apart entire solar systems. Ben Rodriguez had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Every rebel ship carried fusion bombs designed to overload crystal power systems and specially modified weapons that could crack even the hardest alien materials. Rodriguez knew the Zalathi technology was more advanced than anything humans had ever built, but he also knew that human engineering could adapt and overcome any challenge. The space battle that followed was like nothing anyone had ever seen. Crystal ships that looked like flying cathedrals fired beams of pure energy, while human vessels darted between them like metal sharks. Corvin warships launched swarms of fighter craft, while Aquari ships used water-based weapons to short-circuit Zalathi systems. The Rebel Alliance had become something greater than the sum of its parts. Morrison's flagship, the Defiance, led the charge against the inner defensive ring around the crystal planet. The ship that had started the rebellion by saving one little boy was now at the center of the largest military operation in galactic history. Morrison felt the weight of every decision as explosions lit up the space around his bridge. Park's Ghost fleet penetrated deep into the Zalathi defensive perimeter using stealth technology developed by rebel engineers. Her mission was the most dangerous part of the entire operation. She had to get close enough to the ultimate weapon to plant bombs that would destroy it from the inside while the main battle raged above. The turning point came when young Zalathi rebels led by a crystal being named Sharka began attacking their own government forces from within the planet's defenses. Sharka represented a new generation of Zalathi who were tired of their species being parasites that consumed other civilizations to survive. "We do not want to be the monsters our ancestors became," Sharka broadcast to both sides during the battle. "Some Zalathi choose a different path, and we will help you stop the weapon that would make us all murderers." The crystal civil war that erupted on the planet's surface changed everything about the final battle. Half the Zalathi forces turned against their own government, while rebel ships pushed through the weakened orbital defenses. Morrison realized they were not just fighting to stop a weapon, but helping an entire species free itself from its own dark history. Rodriguez led the engineering teams that fought their way into the crystal weapon facility while the battle raged overhead. The ultimate weapon was a thing of terrible beauty that looked like a crystal flower the size of a city. Energy patterns flowed through its structure like liquid light, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with barely contained power. "Captain, the weapon is almost ready to fire," Rodriguez reported over the communication system. "If they activate it before we can plant the bombs, they could destroy half the rebel fleet with one shot." Morrison made the hardest decision of his life. He ordered Rodriguez to ram the Defiance directly into the weapon facility to give the demolition teams more time to complete their mission. The ship that had carried humanity from second-class citizenship to galactic leadership would make the ultimate sacrifice to ensure freedom for all species. But Rodriguez had a different plan. The chief engineer who had kept obsolete human ships competitive with alien technology knew there was another way. He took a small team into the heart of the crystal weapon and began rewiring its control systems to turn the device's power against itself. "Captain, I can make this thing eat itself from the inside," Rodriguez said. "Give me 5 more minutes and the Zalathi ultimate weapon becomes the galaxy's biggest fireworks show." Park fought her way through Crystal soldiers and rebel Zalathi forces to reach the weapon control center. She found Rodriguez working frantically to reverse the energy flow, while explosions shook the massive structure around them. The human engineer was covered in crystal dust and bleeding from a dozen cuts, but his hands never stopped moving across the alien controls. The weapon began to overload just as the old Zalathi leadership tried to activate it against the rebel fleet. Instead of projecting its power outward, the crystal formation began consuming its own energy in a feedback loop that Rodriguez had created. The mountain-sized structure started to crack and glow as it prepared to tear itself apart. Rodriguez looked at Park with tired eyes and smiled. "Tell Morrison the weapon is neutralized. Tell him humanity kept its promise to free the galaxy from crystal tyranny. And tell my family on Harmony Colony that their old man helped make the universe a better place for their children." Park tried to get Rodriguez out of the facility, but the chief engineer refused to leave. Someone had to stay behind to make sure the overload continued until the weapon was completely destroyed. Rodriguez pushed Park toward the exit and turned back to his work as the crystal structure began to collapse around him. The explosion of the ultimate weapon could be seen from orbit as a pillar of light that reached toward the stars. The heart of Zalathi power vanished in a blast that shook the entire planet and sent shockwaves through the crystal formations that covered its surface. Rodriguez's sacrifice had saved not just the rebel fleet, but every inhabited world in the galaxy. Morrison felt his friend's death like a physical blow, but there was no time to grieve. The space battle was still raging, and the old Zalathi government was making one last attempt to escape with their remaining ships. Morrison rallied the rebel fleet for a final push to capture or destroy the crystal leaders, who had oppressed the galaxy for so long. The last Zalathi resistance collapsed when Admiral Collins arrived with reinforcements from Earth and the liberated human colonies. The Federation species that had remained loyal to crystal rule found themselves outnumbered and abandoned by their former masters. One by one, the alien governments that had supported Zalathi expansion began surrendering to the rebel alliance. Sharka and the young Zalathi rebels helped establish a new government on the crystal homeworld based on cooperation instead of conquest. For the first time in their species' history, the Zalathi would try to sustain themselves through trade and diplomacy rather than consuming other civilizations. Morrison stood in the ruins of the ultimate weapon facility where Rodriguez had made his final sacrifice. The chief engineer's body had been vaporized in the explosion, but his tools were still scattered around the control station where he had worked to save the galaxy. Morrison picked up Rodriguez's favorite wrench and decided it would become a monument to human determination. The war ended not with conquest, but with cooperation. Senator Amy Hughes worked with representatives from dozens of species to create a new galactic alliance based on equality and mutual respect. Every species would have an equal vote regardless of their military power or economic strength. The strong would protect the weak instead of exploiting them. Captain Lisa Park became Admiral Park and took command of the Alliance peacekeeping fleet. Her job was to make sure no species ever again had to choose between oppression and extinction. The Ghost Fleet became the guardians of freedom for every world in the galaxy. Morrison retired from military service and became an ambassador helping to integrate former Federation species into the new alliance. He often visited New Denver Colony, where Danny Carter had grown up to become an engineer like Rodriguez. The boy whose tears had started a galactic revolution was now building schools where human and alien children learned together. Admiral Collins established the Rodriguez Memorial Academy on Earth, where engineers from every species came to study the creative problem-solving techniques that had won the war. Human adaptability became the foundation for a new approach to technology that emphasized cooperation over competition. Years later, Morrison stood in his garden on Earth and watched ships from dozens of species pass overhead on their way to new worlds and new adventures. The galaxy was at peace, and freedom was no longer something species had to fight for, but something they could take for granted. A young reporter asked Morrison what he thought about when he looked back at the war and the choice he had made at New Denver Colony. Morrison thought about Rodriguez and all the others who had died to make the galaxy a better place. He thought about Danny Carter playing with Zalathi children on worlds where different species lived as equals. I think about a little boy crying for his parents, Morrison said.